But yes. Alright, what do you got? The strange case of Bruno Borges. I don't know who this is. Should I know who this is? Maybe I do know who this is. Maybe I do know. Bruno Borges. Now that's a PogChamp.
We discuss the story of a 24-year-old college student who abruptly went missing, leaving behind a room full of symbols, 14 handwritten encoded manuscripts, and the entire world scratching their heads.
Wait, what?
Tonight we discuss the story of a 24-year-old college student who abruptly went missing, leaving behind a room full of symbols.
Dude, this audio is absolutely terrible. I'm fucking
Said to
bald.
good morning, Forsen.
Alright, I mean, half fail, I would say. You have to have a colon after Santa. But, well played, mate.
14 handwritten encoded manuscripts, and the entire world scratching their heads. But first, a quick word on behalf of
I refuse.
Bruno Borges was described by his family as
Oh,
intelligent.
you can't even see, chat. Wow.
Tonight we discuss the story of a 24-year-old college student who abruptly went missing, leaving behind a room full of symbols, 14 handwritten encoded manuscripts, and the entire world scratching their heads. But first, a quick word on behalf of today's sponsor.
Manuscripts. Ooh. Encoded.
Bruno Borges was described by his family as intelligent. The philosophy student loved reading.
Every parent ever describes their kid as intelligent.
So much so that, according to relatives, he was capable of burning through 15
He's
books a month.
intelligent, but just lazy.
But he also loved writing.
He's
On March
intelligent,
27,
but other things get in the way.
2017, Bruno had gone missing from his
Like
family
drugs.
home in Brazil, but not before covering his bedroom entirely with characters and symbols. Every inch of it, from floor to ceiling, had been marked. Upon inspection, it was discovered that Bruno left behind 14 manuscripts, all of which were encoded and, much like the walls, hand-done. Accompanying the manuscripts and writing on the walls were diagrams, images, and most fixated on by the media, a painting of Bruno and an alien, both wearing cloaks, and a statue of philosopher Giordano Bruno. Upon the news of Bruno's disappearance and the discovery of his bizarre growth, the
Illuminati
media
obsessed. Oh shit, boys.
and internet alike were abuzz. Theories were being thrown left and right as to what it all meant, many convinced that Bruno was involved with some kind of secret society, or maybe something even more. Others, however, were not so convinced. Bruno meanwhile remained missing, and the police as well as the public began investigating. If you remember the story from back when it was breaking, then you may not know what happened next or the greater details of the case, including Bruno's eventual reappearance, all of which will be covered in this video. But first, who exactly was Bruno Borges? Unfortunately, not much is known about the man aside from things that came up during the investigation. Again, Bruno was 24 at the time, a resident of Brazil and studying philosophy. We do know that he lived with relatives, his mother, father, and a few siblings, including a twin brother. According to the family, Bruno's mother and father had been away on a trip for almost a month before returning home, only to find their son missing. Bruno's siblings note that during the time span where their parents were away, Bruno had locked himself in his room and stopped eating regularly, to the point of noticeably losing weight.
Stopped eating regularly. Who eats regularly?
Bruno's disappearance in itself was, of course, a mystery, and
Hey,
a
Forsen,
legal one at that.
I just got a speeding ticket in a work car. I told my boss that it was just unlucky. He laughed and said that I have a lucky brain. I guess I don't have a job now. Unlucky. Said him.
But the public were much
Unlucky.
more entranced by his bizarre bedroom, which had been gutted and painted white before being covered in coded messages. Needless to say, it quickly overshadowed the public's interest in Bruno's whereabouts. As mentioned earlier, Bruno had left behind 14 handwritten manuscripts, each numbered by a Roman numeral, and while a lot of details are unclear, it's a general consensus that what we see on the walls here are copies of the coded manuscripts. With all that said, what did these messages say, and
did he write
what do
this
they mean? It's important that I point out that there are
by
a few
hand?
different types of code
Jesus.
used, but none of them were necessarily all that complicated. More on that later. Some translations of Bruno's writing have surfaced online. Here's an example.
For thousands of years, the human being has been trying to find answers to questions like what is the meaning of life. The philosophy that seems to have begun with tales of Miletus in the middle of 700 BC seems to find traces of unanswered questions. The deep search for absolute truth comes from philosophy, and when we talk about easy or difficult paths, we are referring to this type of theory. Okay.
Unsurprisingly, the writing mostly centers on philosophy, Bruno's major at the time if you'll recall. This theme is also echoed in the room's centerpiece, a full-size statue of Giordano Bruno, who, according to Wikipedia, lived in the late 1500s.
How the fuck did he get that in the room when he had siblings in the apartment? Or whatever.
Giordano Bruno, who, according to Wikipedia,
Is it like
lived
IKEA
in the
built
late
yourself once
1500s
it's in
and was
the
known
room,
for being
or?
a mathematician, poet, cosmological theorist, and philosopher. On the 17th of February 1600, he was executed in Rome after being charged with blasphemy and heresy, amongst others. He also happened to be one of Bruno's favorites. One might even argue that Bruno was even obsessed with the man. During all the media madness, many pointed out the eerie coincidence of both men having the name Bruno while sharing what they considered a striking resemblance. This, of course, can only be chalked up to coincidence, but the more you look into this historical figure, the more and more you begin to see where Bruno drew his inspiration from. Like I mentioned earlier, this painting was found amongst the chaos of Bruno's abandoned bedroom. We see Bruno alongside a stereotypical alien. The
Not a
two
bad
dressed in
painting, though.
cloaks. But what does any of this have to do with a 16th century philosophy? Giordano Bruno was known for his belief in life on other planets, something that definitely contributed to his eventual trial and execution by the church. As you can see, based on this monument of the philosopher at the site of his execution, Giordano was often depicted exactly how Bruno chose to showcase him, wearing a cloak. The initial media coverage surrounding Bruno's room described him as an alien enthusiast, and while this may not necessarily be untrue, I do think it's important to note that aliens in this case were secondary next to the focus on Giordano and his work.
Hey, G-A-U-F B C D F G H I J K L M N O Q R S T U V W X Y Z. Where did P go? It went up yours. Now stop Minecraft and play a weed game.
No, I don't think
Under the
so.
statue of Giordano is this circle. It's one of many that articles and confused onlookers have described as satanic or Illuminati related. First of all, based on everything I've seen here, there is nothing satanic depicted in this room, and I'm not going to bother with the Illuminati stuff. What these symbols actually are appear to be rooted in alchemy, which does cross paths with philosophy during Giordano's time period. Before you weebs step in, Full Metal Alchemist wasn't where alchemy was invented. Yes, it was an actual field of study once upon a time. Yes, there were symbols and circles involved. Look it up. At the end of the day, though, my point
Look
here
it
is
up,
that
as
what I
if
see
anyone needs convincing.
on the surface is actually right in line with the
Are you retarded?
What I'm trying to say is, from where I'm standing, Bruno Borges' room is a shrine dedicated to Giordano Bruno and his legacy. But why? After 5 months missing, Bruno returned home. No big reveal, no tales of kidnapping. The man just showed up. The media quickly began to buzz about Bruno yet again, and with his return came the expectation that we'd be getting a clear explanation of what happened, but that's not exactly how things played out. Once Bruno began speaking to the media, he proved as eccentric as his project would lead you to believe. He
Wait,
admitted to leaving his home by his own accord, telling
where
reporters
did they find him? I missed it now. When did it, what? Where was he hiding? He just returned. Okay.
Is that he'd gone on somewhat of a soul search, an attempt to uncover the meaning of life. In a translated article from G1, Bruno states the following: I was aware that the Philosopher's Stone was within the Dark Land, so I went after entering that Dark Land to find it. Just as the hero enters the cave to slay a dragon, and Jonah has entered a whale, so have I dived into the sea of the unconscious to rescue me.
This guy definitely watched too much anime.
By this point, a ton of other info surrounding the case had surfaced, such as the identity of the person who created the statue of Giordano. Surprisingly, it was made by an 83-year-old man who told the media that he was certain that Bruno was the philosopher reincarnated, destined to complete the work he'd started hundreds of years ago. The weirdness continues with a Reddit post that translates a good amount of the local media coverage surrounding Bruno and the investigation of his disappearance. They note that the day Bruno left home, he did so on foot, with a backpack and hard drive, only to get into a taxi approximately 1 kilometer later. Bruno was soon dropped off at a motel, one conveniently located next to a heavily wooded area known for hosting bonfires and other late-night gatherings. The post mentions a witness, one described as a passerby who spoke of receiving an invitation to some kind of ritual taking place in the aforementioned woods. A local dressmaker chimed in, saying she was commissioned by Bruno to make 3 cloaks, similar to the ones depicted in the images of Giordano. An unidentified friend of Bruno admits to being present during the almost month-long period where the writing and other material was created. He also brings up how Bruno had stopped eating, much like his siblings claimed. There was no mention of whether or not the friend assisted in creating the room, but one can assume that Bruno had help aside from the sculptor. Also noted by various sources are comments made by Bruno's mother, who claims that Bruno had asked her for financial help with a project prior to his disappearance. Upon refusing to admit what the project was about, Bruno's mother opted to not allow him the funds, which he was later able to acquire from a cousin. And while the exact amount is unknown,
Hello,
it's said that
Forsen,
Bruno was
how
able
are
to
you
secure-
doing? Hopefully I found you in good spirits. Are you going to fail at finishing a children's building video game slightly faster again? Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, LYL, oh, oh, oh.
Okay.
the equivalent of roughly 6,000
We're
US
watching
dollars.
something now.
At some point between
$6,000
this and Bruno disappearing,
for a school project in Brazil. Is this cousin also retarded?
he did mention to his mother that he was writing 14 books that would have a major impact on society, an impact that he insisted would be a positive one. Here's where things get really interesting. In June of 2017, while Bruno was still missing, a friend of his had gotten into legal trouble, and as a result, had his residence searched by authorities. Within his home were contracts that detailed the splitting of profits to be made from the sale of one of Bruno's books. Bruno's cousin, the one who agreed to fund his mystery project, was also cited in the contract. It was at this point, before Bruno even showed back up again, that police concluded that Bruno had not been kidnapped or hurt, but simply left. The entire thing assumed and pretty much confirmed to be a hoax set in place to get rich quick.
Well, I guess he found the meaning of life then.
So this is where we are today. Most look back at the Bruno Borges story as a simple hoax. Some have even gone on record as calling it desperate, an unknown writer's attempt at clawing his way into relevancy. While this very well may be true, there is still something odd about the entire situation. We know that Bruno's cousin and at least one of his friends planned to profit from this, but what about everyone else? Did they know about everything that was going on? Were all these little mentions of how intelligent and eccentric Bruno was all for show, even by those not guaranteed a cut of the money? Were Bruno's parents and siblings really unaware of what was going on, or were they all in it from the start? There's no doubt that the so-called disappearance was meant to stir up attention, but the way I see it, hoax aside, there are two possible avenues right now.
Well, he
Either
wasn't
Bruno
smart
is
enough
just
to
really
fucking get
dedicated
away
to
with
the
it.
idea of this marketing stunt,
So I guess
or
not.
he really is obsessed with Giordano Bruno to the point of basing his entire identity on him. Most at this point seem split in their opinions. On one hand, some suspect Bruno of suffering from schizophrenia because, marketing stunt aside, his explanations to things make little sense. While there's definitely nothing related to aliens or the supernatural going on here, many just don't see the logic in most things surrounding the case and can only attribute it to the possibility that Bruno might just be a little unwell. But again, this is only if there's any truth in anything his family said. The Reddit post translating local coverage of Bruno did note comments made by various professionals, both in security and psychiatry. They point out that the codes were actually just simple substitutions, and that everything surrounding this story point to some kind of mental break, with Bruno suffering from delusions of grandeur, believing that his work could change the world. This is only further demonstrated by Bruno's clear obsession with Giordano Bruno, as we discussed a second ago. So,
it kind of looks like that Cypher game.
As it turns out, he's right where we left him. Just a couple of weeks ago, he decided to open up his room to the public, still maintaining that everything was done in an attempt to enlighten himself and the public. He stresses that he made no money from the project, and even has a website where he published his work for free. Upon visiting the site, you'll find the following statement. It describes Bruno as a self-taught mystic, citing a mystical experience when he was 20 as the catalyst for all that followed. The second paragraph reads as follows. Returning home from his spiritual retreat after completing the Enzo project, Bruno Borges denied fame, refusing more than 100 proposals to appear on televised networks or internet channels. He also refused to make his work a way of making money by refusing to participate in advertisements he was offered, famous brands that would pay him up to $50,000. He is currently demonstrating in court that he had made no profit from his project, and that getting rich and famous with philosophy books and studies has always been an absurdity preached by sensationalist media who believe that everyone only targets money, as they mostly ironically do. For Bruno, art must be produced
Targets
in order to
IBOP?
awaken.
What is IBOP? I think fame. I've never heard the word ever. I bop your balls. Fame. Alright. I guess more people are saying fame.
People, and for him, unfortunately, the vast majority of artists who are praised in our country produce content that, instead of awakening, alienates. So, is Bruno Borges a con man, someone suffering a severe mental break, or just a very eccentric artist? I'll leave that decision up to you, and with that all said, thank you so much for watching, and shout out to Patreon supporters Matt, Jenny, and Mark Annan, along with anyone else who supports me there. I'll see you all again soon.
Alright, minus 10 minutes of my life. Nice, PogChamp. Jax, DSB, Life Sue Dogs, Witchcock, Monkey Blues, Matthew's Game, Humorino, STVB with the gift. So thank you very much, Matthew's Game with the 2 years. Can I get a cringe face? Yes, you can, bro. And you did. Enjoy your badge, man. Poke Shampoo donates and says, is this sign real in Sweden for Senga? Ode to elevator guy. Dude, I'm 11,000 views, but at the same down time.
Okay, this one you're almost not gonna believe, but I swear it's true. I'm gonna show you an actual warning sign I saw hanging on a wall in Sweden. I went over to Europe once to see if the audiences would maybe be more appreciative over there, and I was staying at this really cheap place, and this is what I saw hanging on the wall right next to their elevator. Okay.
Yes, it's actually true. I had this in my older apartment, the one before this one. We had this one on the elevator.
Now that had to have happened to someone. You wouldn't come up with that out of nowhere. That has to have already occurred for that sign to exist. I hang around playgrounds a lot.
You what, mate? Alright, let's leave it at that. Shia LaBeouf donates and says, good afternoon, Mr. Force. Is this the origin of... No, I don't think so.
You don't want
yes.
immigrants, foreigners to come and take your jobs here.